Tom's in charge of this one.
It's starting.
Welcome, everybody. I'd like to call this
Oh, I know.
meeting to order. Do I have an adoption of the agenda?
So moved.
Second. Moving second. Favor?
Aye.
Nays, saying no. And you can hear us okay, Samra?
Helps if I turn my microphone on. Yes, I can hear you.
A little disappointed. I was under the impression we might have you all in one room. Maybe the second time. So
The smoke has given me a cough, and I didn't want to bring a cough into the city hall, so I opted to
I
call in.
But decisions for you all to be here. I think that's kind of one of the most important things we got going on. So feel better. So we'll see you soon. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn this over to Tom for the council discussion on proposed 23-24 final budget.
Actually, we'll turn it over to Lindsay, Director Vaughn, please.
It's like you could maybe.
Oh, I appreciate it. It's my minute of fame.
I just, Matt, can you help me with the presentation? I just have a brief presentation. Some questions have come up, and so we're starting to just, with the hope of just starting to cover some of these questions and try to get ahead of them. And so I just did a quick brief presentation to start answering some of them in a group format. So just titled it quick continued budget discussions. Basically the 1.2, the general fund expenditures exceeding the revenues by 1.2, that's come up a couple times. And so I want to bring your attention to that. I just highlighted the two exact numbers, and then it's detailed on page 37, which is on the actual slide of this. So that's detailed on page 37 of your actual budget. And it's, oh, I have page, sorry.
Yeah.
So it's the fund balance, ending fund balance analysis right after the revenue.
Here you go.
And anybody, I will repeat this, anybody who would like me to reprint a budget with budget page numbers, I am happy to do so. Because, yeah, I just did that again today.
So, but that is page 37, right? So we could
That
go
is-
through and.
Yeah, so the ending fund balance analysis down at the bottom part, that is page 37. Yep, you're on it. So it's taking just so actually I will start first with the expenditures. It's revenue less expenditures, so it's just taking the two columns in the middle, the 2023-24, and it's leaving out the fund balances. So the beginning fund balance and the ending fund balance. And that is where the discussion of expenditures exceeding revenues by 1.2 in the general fund, where that's coming from. And then I'm just to give brief examples of the general fund revenue. This is where you would flip back from that page 37. And again, it's noted page 30 through 33. That's just general fund, all of the detail being the taxes, the licenses and permits, the intergovernmental charges for goods and services, and the fines and penalties. All of that detail can be found on page 30 through 33 is where the general fund ends for the revenue side. And then walking down to the examples of general fund expenditures, I kept it pretty broad, saying salaries and benefits, professional services, supplies, travel and training, dues and subscriptions. And then under that, it really, all of those things fall under every single department, which is like the city council, the executive, legal, municipal services, finance and IT, support, community programs, planning, building, parks, facility maintenance, all of that. So the general fund, I forgot police. Do not tell chief. Oops.
Probably upstairs one.
I totally forgot police. Whoops.
Yeah,
We will have to amend that. Whoops.
They
Because
don't-
they are the biggest.
yeah, they don't spend any money.
The biggest expenditure. Oh, that's funny. Do not tell the chief.
Just give them their own bullet on the next draft.
There we go.
There we
Just
go.
say.
And all of those, all of the details on the expenditure side, because that's a little too much to go back over. But again, just detailing out that those are pages 48 through 87 in the released budget. With all of the details of the actual charts, etc. So on that, I'm going to continue to the next slide. And the next topic, and I'm hoping to kind of run through this presentation so that if we are completed, that council can then take the remaining portion and continue to discuss and deliberate. So walking into the general fund, goes into the 6-year forecast, which this graph is different from what we've seen and done in previously. Because I think it's really important to understand, we've been saying that the history hasn't performed as we've been showing on the forecast because, and that's stated in the actual mayor's letter, stating that we've always had the one-offs, we've always had the construction permits, and then we've had the traffic cameras, and then we've had, the increased sales tax. We've always had some one-offs that have continued to keep our revenues or our ending fund balance exceeding our beginning fund balance. And it's one thing to say it, and it's another to see it on a graph. So we went back to 2017-18 to each biennium, and then are walking it forward. So we did, so it's history and forecast on this graph. And everybody has a printed copy of the full 6-year forecast. And there are a couple of physical copies available here. That graph, this exact graph is presented within the 6-year financial forecast. So with that being said, basically what we're trying to show here is we've been talking about it, but the ending fund has shown that we have been increasing it, and that has been due to increased revenue. But I also want to state that that's also due to expenditures that do not need to be spent, not being spent. It's a combination of both. It isn't just one and not the other. It's a combination of both. And then as you walk forward into, oh wait, back, thank you, Matt. So as we walk forward into the actual forecast portion of the 23, 24, 25, 26, and then 27, 28 is where we start to now dip down below the targeted level on the general fund.
So basically, the city's always lived on the hope that Lone Guy will sell that property in 2025. That's gonna give us our fund back. But that's the way we live, just on those one-time events that help us stay afloat.
And if you go back and you look, actually, I went back and looked at the previous forecast that was put out, and the cross was in 2026. And so every single year that we put out these forecasts, it seems like we're able to, as we've said previously, push it off a little bit. But I think the message here is that the general fund has, there are some concerns in the future at the end of the 6 years, within the 6 years. So that's what we're starting to show, and I'll leave it at that. going to the next slide,
Could I just ask a quick question?
yes.
Reflected in the graphs, are the federal dollars that we've received the last couple of years reflected in this graph, or are you only looking at things like the traffic camera revenue and the building permit revenue?
That's a great question. This is just general fund and some federal dollars have been infused into this. But they are, the ARPA dollars are within their own fund.
Okay.
But some of those dollars are being allocated into the general fund in order to pay for things within the general fund. Example, radar is a good example.
Is that why we see a little bit of a peak then? Because some of those are augmented by federal funds. No,
I would say that's,
No, so in this biennial budget, so the peak that you're seeing is the $1.8 million in one-time funds last year. That was a combination of savings and the school zone traffic cameras.
Okay,
This does
Thank
not
you.
reflect federal dollars. The only federal dollars that are in the general fund for the upcoming biennium are the dollars to, as Lindsay said, if you remember the spreadsheet that we gave you when we proposed the mayor's budget, there were things in there that we were recommending council budget and pay for using ARPA dollars. One of that was the radar
Right.
expansion. One of those was it pays for Lindsay's time, my time, and Tim's time to administer ARPA. And there were other projects within that, but those expenditures meet the revenues that we're putting into the general fund. There's no addition. So,
no, thanks. You explained what the,
yeah.
what
so
the,
that-
what
yeah,
causes
that's
the
the
peak,
1.8.
it's something else, the 1.8 million. Thank you.
Yes, so if you extrapolate the orange line, it looks like in 2029 it goes negative. Does that mean you're projecting essentially the city's bankrupt by 2029?
no. That is definitely not what is being stated. So what is being stated is that the target is our policy. Our internal policy that we've set is the 16%. So and I expanded that as the target being 16%, and that is stated within our comprehensive financial management policy that is tied within this, that is included within this budget. So you can refer back to that if you'd like to. That's where the target of 16% comes from.
It's
So
our
you-
cushion that
Need to
we're trying
explain what the
to,
16% is.
yes.
Oh, that's our reserves. That's our stated reserves. For 4 funds, we've stated it for the general fund, street fund, and the two sewer fund and surface water fund. Those are the 4 funds that have been called out that specifically have to have a 16%, and 16%, I'll take a minute and state this again. Thank you for backing me up. And so the 16% is calculated on an annual basis, though. So even though we do a biennial budget, it basically you would be taking the number on a real quick way to do it is take the number on page 37. If you take the revenue, and our policy states off of revenue. It can be done either way. Best practice says you can do it off of revenue or expenditures. This is the first city I've been at that's based it off of revenue, but you take that, divide it by 2 because we do a biennial, and then you times that by 16. That's how that calculation is done for the 16% of the target.
This is a fiscally conservative and careful
Yeah.
way to go. And it's something that I think serves our city well. We need that kind of caution in our policies and practices, I think.
Historically, we were.
So I just want to know if you got that.
Well, that wasn't quite what I was asking. My concern is, like, what does it mean for a city when the general fund hits a balance of $0 or less?
So I think to your point, what this shows is that if we did not have these one-time bumps, by the time we get to about 2027, revenues will be far enough below expectations that we continue to dip into fund balance to a point where we get below 16%. This is not something we want to do. That's why we've been having the discussion of what are revenue, what are the revenue triggers that you could pull to not get to that? Because there's been a structural deficit for, I don't know, 10 years now.
Yeah, at least.
One thing before your Councilmember Lebo, 60% is kind of a self-imposed number.
Yes.
A lot of
Raised
cities
it several
are-
times.
We've done that just to give us a figure. There's a lot of city norms, what's the norm?
I think the norm is around 8%. So, governmental, finance, like, what does GFOA stand for? Governmental Finance Officers Association or something along those lines. They provide a best practice, and their best practice is a 16%. That's where the 16% comes from. So we have adopted within our policies to hold ourselves as the city of Lake Forest Park to that higher target to make sure that we don't go below it. Also, another very common thing that you will hear is 2 months of operating expenditures is what you need to have as reserves. 8% or at least 2 months of operating expenditures. That's another very common reserve policy.
So you might think of it as, if you think about your personal account, you have a checking account in which you get your paycheck deposited in, and you use the checking account to pay for your expenditures like rent and groceries. Then you have a savings account. A savings account is intended for the day that you get laid off. And it's meant to take you and you're living paycheck to paycheck. But you have your savings account, so the day you get laid off, you have enough money so that you can get another job in 2 months.
Fortunately, COVID destroyed a lot of cities.
That's what.
Yes, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I think what Councilmember Goldman was talking about is like if we don't get any of those one-time bumps and we go out another biennium in this graph, that would then we would be below. I mean, we'd be below the $0 amount. And I think that's just his question was more theoretical. Like if we don't have any of these one-time bumps and we do go out another biennium, what does that look like for the city? That's kind of what I heard his question was.
The gray line is your savings account.
Right.
Below the gray line is $500,000. Below that is zero. If you take those blue and yellow or blue and orange, one more biennium, they go below the line that isn't on the graph.
Well, no, it's not projected out yet.
Right.
But just based on this, it says that when you go.
It was a theoretical question. If this was
just gonna-
projected out another biennium and we would end up in that situation, what would that mean for the city is what I heard the question was.
Well, you'd cut expenditures.
Extremely tough decisions, and I'm trying to politely say this, but it's like you would be taking major cuts and extremely tough decisions, and that's why we're having this conversation now.
I know. Yeah. So it would mean reduction of services. It would mean additional revenue sources that we would have to go to the community for. We would have to make that up and recover that in those sort of methods. So we would have to make action. We'd have to do something to avoid that. And I think, Larry, is that closer to kind of what you were thinking?
Yeah, I was mainly concerned if you take the orange line and you extrapolate it to the 29-30 cycle, what would that be?
Well, that would probably
Yeah.
get done real. That's why we're having this.
Right.
We're doing all this. We don't want that orange line. We have to figure out a way to work together to where we can't, like I said, we can't always depend on one-time bumps. We need to figure out a way to make this so it can run itself without doing that.
Couple of historical context pieces too. We talked about this before. 10, 11 years ago, the lines, there was no upswing with the lines. Lines were completely going down. And at one point there was a cross was where we were gonna, have to dip into our reserves, was only a few years out. The other thing is, as the mayor said, which I think is really important to highlight, is that 16% is self-imposed, and it was, I believe it was originally 10 or 11 a decade ago. And because of the concern about this very structural, challenge here, We fought very hard tooth and nail to claw up to that 16% to make sure that we had that kind of reserve. Because we don't want to be in the position that some of these other communities have been in during difficult economic times.
The way it actually started to kick us off to make that gray line go up is we paid off City Hall. And when we paid off City Hall, the decision was made not to go, woohoo, we made money, we actually started
Putting it away.
putting it away, and that's why we went that direction. That's also when the fund that John Wright was, so what we call that,
Strategic opportunities.
the opportunity.
Oh, the strategic opportunity, yeah.
We were both, Tom and I were both sold pretty much, especially when I got elected on the council, that the city was gonna be bankrupt.
Jack, you're so good.
Yeah,
This is why
2015,
you're on
we were told it was, the city was in dire straits at that point.
And what we need to do is gonna start paper towels, that would save the city some money.
Right, yes. And it reminds me too,
Thank you.
Mayor, that the Public Works Trust Fund, when we pay off the loan from that, that's another opportunity for us to. We're not going to have to be paying that indefinitely, and once we get that paid off, that's another opportunity for us to sock away some money in
Thank you.
different places. I think it was for
Yes.
So yeah, thanks for the explanation, Director Don. I think adding to the conversation, the reason why we need to deal with it now is the trend is disturbing. So we dropped like about a little over 1 million in the next biennium, a little over 2 million in the next biennium, and a little over 2.5 million in the last biennium that's shown there in terms of the starting balance. Sorry, ending balance. And so the question is, that's almost exponential behavior, which means that if we don't deal with it now, it will be much harder to deal with it later. Meaning that, is there like a reason why the amount drops so much precipitously as we get later in time? Is there a particular cause or causes?
Yes. Then you asked that.
I got away here. So the real reason that we see this trend is because we as a city are limited to raising property taxes 1% a year. Meanwhile, inflation is now running at 8, 9, even who knows, into double figures. And I'm assuming that the trend line that we see there, the forecasting that you've done uses some inflation to predict how things are going to pan out in the future. I don't know what figure you use. I'd be kind of curious to understand that. But it is the reason that we are not the only city facing this problem. Every city in the state of Washington is facing this problem because of the 1% cap. And it is a political problem that needs to be dealt with. And personally, I lobby as hard as I can every time I talk to a state legislator about this problem. And many of our state legislators are very uneducated about local city budgeting. And any opportunity any of us get, and that's for the community as well as those that are sitting around this table, to talk to state legislators about the difficulties that cities face right now, you've got to take it because they are just not really paying attention.
The citizens think that as we see these fancy houses being built and stuff and property values going up, that gives us more because it's the 1% on top of the higher assessed value, but that's not the way it works. It's 1% collectively on the amount that we collect every year. And so that's one thing. I will note that at Sound City's PIP last night, Mercer Island was complaining about this. And, I think of Mercer Island as quite affluent, but they were saying, we're having a really hard time with inflation because of the 1% cap and because our revenue is largely drawn from property taxes.
Right.
So I thought that was,
Yeah.
yeah, I thought that was funny.
Before I go on, still, I just like say, when you do go to Olympia, you gotta realize that only maybe 1% of the people down there have ever been on a city council. So they don't know how a city budget works. I was very shocked to find that out, that there's a very, very minute amount of people down there that have ever done your job you're doing right now, which is a shame because this is where you're really getting down to, they don't see the pain that they come up with a good idea when they tell us mandate us to do it. They never send a check along with that. So That's my 2 cents on that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to cover one point that we haven't discussed on beginning and ending fund balance saving for the next biennium. We had 1.8 roughly $1 million in the next. We've only committed 1.2 of that to the general fund. So we were very diligent in saying, these are the things we think as administration, we absolutely have to have. Some of those have ongoing implications. But the other 500,000 of that 1.8-ish has been left in fund balance because we recognize this as well. It's like, we've got some extra money. We don't think we need to allocate that in this budget. So let's save it. Trying to figure out this revenue.
But that's
Yeah,
basically
thank
the
you.
Malthusian problem, right? Which is you can do that additively, whereas these go up exponentially.
Yeah.
So you can only go so far.
So
with
far,
that.
yes.
I'm just curious, and I didn't pick up on it before, but we have our reserves based upon revenue and not expenditures. That seems a bit odd because the purpose of it is to cover expenditures, not revenue.
But,
I mean, it's like a savings account. If you're not working, you're not getting payroll. It's not a function of how much you're earning. It's how much you save.
I think why, and this is my best educated guess because I was not the decision maker behind it, behind the revenue piece, is that your revenues typically are supposed to exceed your expenditures in a perfect world. So they leaned on going for the revenues to hold the 16 at a little bit of a higher. But this is the first city that I have worked for that it has been based on revenue and not expenditures. Because you're right, you are supposed to be covering expenditures. And so I had to do some research back and find out, and you can do it both ways. Both ways are considered a best practice.
It's based on the history of, less than fabulous finances way in the past, so it gives us a little bit bigger cushion and security. So it's based on that past history.
But you can just change the percentage.
Yeah, that was my recollection as well, Lori, that,
Yeah.
that, I can't remember when that was put into place, it may have been many years ago. So I don't.
Yeah, how that started. So what would you want to change it to? Lower then?
No, I don't know that I would lower it. I would just base it on expenditure because that's really what you're concerned about.
That would be a good conversation for her next year, because this is just the way the city's done it.
And I was just gonna say, my recollection is too, that at the time that it was set, expenditures had varied quite considerably because of the fact that the opposition didn't pass to raise property taxes. And so expenditures were cut quite dramatically. And so you didn't have a good history of expenditures to base
true.
16% off. So it was easier to do it off the revenues.
Okay, then we'll have to work on that. Yeah, that's exactly, the payroll got cut just
Yeah.
drastically after that.
Okay, walking to thank you, the next slide. So, a lot of questions have come up about it's been called the tree fund, and my first thing right out the gate is it's the tree account, not fund. And I want to get that cleared up right away. So the tree account is, and all of those monies are held within the general fund, both revenue and expenditure. So it's the city forestry account is where the money is coming in. And there's a table next to it. And we can send this out to everybody. And the revenue that comes into the city forestry account is tree fines and penalties. You will see there are 2 influxes of money in 21 and 22. And if you remember back, we had to amend a previous budget or this budget. in order to add the King County Waterworks grant. And those two are the King County, they're clearly labeled on the right, it's the King County Waterworks grant. And that's a one-time grant that's gonna be finalized, I think, believe within this year. And then walking down to the expenditures, the tree account expense has supplies and professional services. And then it shows as a, both basically the supplies and services, those are the two bars, account numbers. And then at the bottom, we just actually paid a very large invoice for Mackler Creek within that 13,480. And then the anticipation, walking down to the final item for the tree arborist is that is paid for out of the planning department. And that is also within the general fund, and the proposal to expand the hours that the arborist works for the city is anticipated to be funded out of this source.
Out of which source planning?
Out of, sorry, the tree account dollars, which would draw down that balance. So, keeping that in mind, and I believe yeah, it was, I think it was the value of that was under about $30,000, to increase those hours. And so that will continue to pull off of the tree account.
I'm gonna say run real quick thing, it's not like your thing, but as far as the arborists, you all live in different neighborhoods, please let people know that they're just working for us and they need to be treated a lot better. We lost the last one basically because people were so not, they were so uncivil to them, you could not handle it. So if we want arborists, the citizens of this city need to start waking up and finding out that we can't treat people bad, and it's both sides. But it's not the arborist's fault, they're just there to help us. So just remember that if they're gonna do that, we gotta find an arborist. Yeah, I guess.
It's a tough job, but
Yeah.
and this is my final slide.
Can you go back for me? So, Brett, the tree account. The $138,000, does that just represent what does that represent?
The amount of revenue that's been receipted into the city forestry account, and between that and the waterworks grant since 2016.
Okay, so in that time period, we got $138,000.
That is correct.
And
And
in that same time period, we spent out of this account $49,000.
that is correct.
But we are planning to spend more money out of that in the 23-24 by.
Correct.
by how much?
And that's, I'd have to go back and double check, but I do believe the value of increasing the hours for the arborist was under 30,000. And I'd have to double check if that was a biennial number or an annual number.
Here it is. Tree account. This site with the changes, it's.
Part of what I'm wondering is this thing.
I know I can get you there. It's-
This is just, so the part that's being proposed to be funded out of this is the addition of hours.
How much does that mean? So at the end of 23-24 by 80, what are these numbers?
We might not be able to fund the additional hours. I think you're spotting that, yeah.
Yeah,
So we need to raise the fees and that'll make people mad. Or you just basically give the city the finger and cut down the tree and mayor has to sign up. Fine,
So
there you go.
So regarding the tree account, am I correct that with Sound Transit, if they wind up removing trees along 522, they would likely be paying into this account to, rather than them replanting trees themselves?
That would be,
That would have to be something we would discuss with Sound Transit. So you either go out and you plant it yourself. Some cities like Shoreline set up a program with Sound Transit. That's been more of a agreement with property owners. So you have a palette to select from. Well, we haven't even entered into discussion with soundtracks. That's one of the questions we ask currently is, how are we gonna handle your compliance with the tree code and replacement? Because it may not be able to replace it all there, so you then enter into an agreement with a fund where they pay in the value of what needs to be replaced. We do it throughout the city of Australia. We don't do that right now.
I have, I think we have to be careful, about taking money instead of trees. Because I have a lot of experience with mitigation where the money's never enough. Over time to actually provide the mitigation that was originally committed to, so I'd want to have some sideboards that the commitment is to the trees and the money funds the trees. So I just wanted to flag that because it's a sensitive issue for me. Don't take a check as mitigation without some sideboards.
Thank you. So I just want to understand a little bit more about how we're going to fund an arborist going forward. So right now, the arborist has been paid under the planning department. Has up till this point, have funds that have been derived from tree permits and fines been used to fund that salary?
Tree permits, not fines.
Tree permits. And going forward, if we increase the hours, is the trend on revenue from tree permits, is that enough to fund that salary, or
That would take, I would have to hit a pause button on that and discuss that with our planning director to do that evaluation. But the only piece that's being proposed to use these tree fund or tree account, whoops, tree account, see?
Right.
You kind of make the mistake sometimes. These tree count dollars is the addition, the slight addition of hours, not the full salary. And so the addition, the increase of the hours is 24,500.
That's like,
And yes,
okay,
Mhm.
so what I'm trying to wrap my head around here is this what, a sort of self-funded position in the sense that the permits and whatever else comes into that free account fund the salary of the person doing the work, or is money from the general fund from other sources going to be needed to continue to fund an arborist at a higher level of hours than we are currently employing one? I'm fine if that's the case, but I think it's a little unclear to us, or a little unclear to me anyway, and I haven't been in on all the conversations, obviously, because I've been away, but it's a little unclear to me how that's working.
I believe internally, our short-term solution was to fund the increase, only the increase out of these dollars in order to expand that position. It's still a part-time position, but to expand it just a little bit in order to assist with the demand from that position. But I do understand what you're asking, and I don't have the answer.
Okay,
I would have to do a little research and
yeah,
in order to,
I just don't know what is our revenue annually for tree permits or over time. I just don't have any idea, and I don't know how it matches up with the salary. So,
that gets wrapped into land use permits. So they all go into the same bucket, and it's a land use permit, so.
right, I
So we'd have to try and parse that out.
tease it out a bit. I understand that. I mean, I would hope that we're actually tracking tree permit dollars though, pretty cleanly. But
Yeah,
maybe not.
John, Councilmember Lebo, then Councilmember Riddle.
So, Councilmember Bodie raises a very good point about tree funds. I've been on both sides, I collected and paid. There are things that as a city you can do. So for example, the city of Redmond is establishing an ordinance that does have a fee in lieu component. And what they're doing is they're establishing what is the dollar amount per tree. Without a dollar amount per tree, it becomes negotiations with whomever is proposing the in the case of Redmond, they're doing $500 a tree. I can tell you that if you're, look at the value of the tree that you're planting, it's generally less than $500. So the value of $500 is to capture enough money to plant the trees and maintain. The other is that cities have run into problems. Same city ran into the problem, which was mitigation that for work that was being done by various agencies. There was no place to plant the trees.
Right.
And so they have this problem that they have to mitigate all these trees, but there's no place to plant them because the city couldn't identify locations to plant the trees. But they did have a fee in lieu dollar amount that was set at a level that they could recover enough money, because otherwise it becomes a negotiation, right? Which you may not be in the best position to negotiate. So two things. I'd recommend the city find places to plant trees, or set up an ordinance for a fee in lieu so that it's at an appropriate level, that when you have to have that because you don't have places to plant trees.
You have an ordinance.
Yeah,
point
there's-
to. Well, you could give free trees to citizens to plant in their yards, I guess.
That's the problem with that.
Yes,
is that you don't always end up with the appropriate speaker.
I think this is,
Right.
remember, to this point, we will be coming back to the tree ordinance as well. I completely agree with you, by the way.
Yeah,
We did have a
thank you.
situation. in Sharon
That's-
Heights.
that's a good tip. So thank you.
Councilmember Riddle.
Thank you. I guess I want to address a couple of things. One, the arborist, and one, fee in lieu of. I'll tackle fee in lieu of first. We did have that, and it was at one of those lower dollar amounts, and the community really didn't appreciate how easy it was for developers to throw what was essentially a few dollars just to cut down all the trees on a lot. So our current code is partially in response to some development where that fee in lieu of was abused. So if we go back to that, I think we need to go back to our community and really understand what's the appropriate dollar amount. How do we come to that? So there's sort of a history there. For the arborist hours, looking at the budget document, it says that the additional hours will be used to do more, be more systematic about ensuring the permit recipients are fulfilling the required tree replacement. And it will also allow the city arborist to engage in community forest planning with the tree board. If the increased hours is related to tree permits, I feel like we should keep that in the tree permit environment. So whether that's increasing the tree permit value or what, I don't know, but to me, I think that should be within that cycle. I think the extra stuff, the community forest planning, things of that nature, I would be more amenable to having coming out of the tree account. It's more of a general usage of the arborist, but I would feel that we want to keep the arborist pay that is used to address a tree permit from within that tree permit dollar amount. So is there a way that we can have some estimate as to how the planning department anticipates that additional 6 hours a week would be allocated?
Okay, I'll answer a little of that. You know, to be honest, we need a full-time arborist. This city could probably use 1.5 arborists. We just don't know how to pay for that yet, but that is one of the hardest, most, you know, you all know trees are the city. It's really some tough situations come up. So I would love it. I'm more of an arborist and have it funded by itself, like tree permits and stuff. But you know, that's something we're gonna have to work on, because we do need more than a 2/3 arborist. We need a full-time arborist. Yes, Larry.
That's a question about how many hours the arborist is being increased. I'm on the planning department page. So in one paragraph, it says that it's increasing from 24 to 30 hours per week. But then it also says it's an increase of 0.2 FTE. So wouldn't 0.2 FTE be 8 hours increased? If it's going up to a 0.8 FTE position, wouldn't that be 32 hours a week?
And I might have to review that. Because I'd have to go back and look at what was asked for.
6 hours.
Yeah. That's a good catch.
Mhm.
It's worth a double check. Thank you.
Okay, folks, it's about 6:44. We got any other questions, good conversations? Do you have anything right now?
Could I ask, since I've been away, what are like the top 2 to 3 issues that the council has flagged in my absence? Because I haven't had a chance to review all the meeting videos.
That's a good question. I wouldn't say issues as much as topically. We have some very basic additions, minor changes. So I think one of the questions that came up was that it's been described today, the backing the federal funds out of
Oh,
for
right.
clarity for
Okay.
the fund balance question, so that it tracks accurately in everyone's mind, particularly the public, that they recognize that, yes, we're filling some holes and we're also replenishing some things here as
Right.
well. So that's
Right, okay,
quite helpful. The other question that came up was, again, the 6-year financial forecast as
Okay.
well. And so
okay, very
we'll be
good.
talking about it at our next meeting, and Councilmember Riddle actually sent me some additional things this evening about topical kinds of things. I'm
Okay.
going to try to distill it down to 5 or 6 kind of general groups, and then whether or not we have to do them on a proviso basis or
Right.
do it on some modifications or
Right.
whatever else.
I'm always interested in the provisos.
It
Thank
is-
you.
It is important on that note, it is important to be aware that we've talked fairly extensively about, because we're unable to fill the project manager position.
Right.
That at some point, we can do this somehow on a proviso basis, but we're gonna have to figure out a way to fund it, it's gonna be more expensive. To actually engage with a subcontractor to do that work relative to
Okay.
the sewer.
That's fair, okay,
What's it called? Master plan, thank you.
yeah, okay,
I just call it sewer account, sewer fund.
thank you, those all make sense to me.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'd be happy to talk with you more about some of these other ones as well.
I think, yeah, I think those make, I get those, so anyway, I'm
Good
good.
question. Thank you.
Anybody else at
Anybody
this
else?
time?
Since we're talking about trees, does the survey that's proposed, where we go out and survey tree, what is the tree canopy? Does that just come out of the general fund?
What is that? It's the tree,
That was part of that grant.
Okay,
yeah.
I believe
in the
that
tree
that's what
account.
that grant, waterworks grant, is paying for that. I think there's some general fund dollars, and then this was supplementing that, this was additional to give us. I can double check Steve on the details.
and I'm just thinking in terms of how do we pay for things, so. Because we have so many different accounts and budgets, but some of them need to be sort of self-sustaining. And we have a problem with the general fund, which is not self-sustaining. Because a 1% increase a year is not going to cover the expenditures associated with the general fund. So there are sort of 2 things that have to happen. We get a sale of the shopping mall. So we get an infusion into the general fund because of the sales tax, or we cut expenditures in the general fund.
And I believe that expenditure was originally in the general fund, and now some of it's being offset by the grant.
Okay, thanks.
I would apply. In the,
John, in my mind, it's very challenging because I like things the way my brain works, I like things to be very clean and discreet and self-sustaining for each of these different types of services that are being provided. Unfortunately, there's some of them, it appears that there has to be some little bit of spillover and infusions of cash to keep going. Part of it is when it goes to trees. Initially, when we first passed the tree code 2015, I'm trying to remember when the original code was put into place. The fees were very high, and there was a pretty significant backlash. And what the arborist was finding was that people rather than being encouraged to come in and grab a permit, they were just kind of doing it surreptitiously, which was not the behavior we wanted to see. So we revisited sort of the fee schedule after we were able to find a better understanding of how much time is actually needed to administer the program. So, but I think that we need to really revisit that here as well. Yeah.
Okay. With that, I think we adjourn this meeting, so Matt, get up there and get everything ready to go. So, anything else? See y'all upstairs.